Shalom again, my friends. Great to be back. Last weekend, I had the opportunity to spend Shabbat with 4,000 of my colleagues, Chabad rabbis from around the world, literally every continent. To the extent, when I went into the bakery Friday to get a cup of coffee, I was online and someone interviewing the rabbis for one of the local media said, "Hey, where are you from? Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Nashville." My friend said he's from Beijing, the other one from Jamaica, another one from Staten Island, everybody from all over. And he said, "Wow, what is the common denominator of the rabbis from every city and every country in the world with the Jewish community?" And we said, "You know why we are there? For love for our fellow Jew, for our brethren, and for everyone who calls upon us. We are a light of Yiddishkeit, a lighthouse, and that's why we are there." Friends, it was the most inspiring weekend. And I heard a beautiful thought I wanted to share with you, something that's difficult to understand on the Torah portion of this week. Please allow me to share with you this fascinating insight onto something that's been bothering me for a while. You know, we read this story about how Jacob and Esau were going to get the blessings from Isaac. Isaac was already 123 years old, and he was blind, and he wanted to bless his son Esau, who was not the most well-behaved. He was a wild man. And his mom, Rebecca, felt, hey, you know what? Esau shouldn't get these blessings. Really, Jacob should get these blessings. Now, Isaac was very old. He said, "Esau, go and hunt for me some good food, bring it back, and I will share the most amazing blessings with you." Well, Rebecca hears about this. She goes, no. Esau is not going to get these blessings. And she goes and she prepares a beautiful meal for Isaac, for her husband. And she actually puts on Jacob some of Esau's clothing. Because remember, Isaac was blind. He couldn't see Jacob. But she said, you know what? If I put him on Esau's clothing and I give him some good food, Jacob really deserves to get the blessings. Like this, he will get it instead of Esau. Well, she quickly summons her son Yaakov, and she puts on the special clothing, and she prepares the most delicious meal for him to bring his father instead of Esau. Jacob arrives, and he says, "Dad, I am Esau, your firstborn son." Now, it actually worked, this plan. And Isaac couldn't see Jacob, as he was a bit older, and his eyes were not in the best of health. He takes the meal, and he eats the food, and he believes it's Jacob there, and he gives him the most beautiful blessings. Now, as soon as Jacob finishes getting the blessings, who walks in? Esau walks in the doorway, and he went to hunt for his dad, and he says, Dad, give me the blessings." It was at that moment that Isaac realized what happened, and he begins to tremble, and he tells Esau, "Sorry, you're too late. Your brother was smarter than you, and he came and he took these blessings." Friends, something's been bothering me and so many others. I mean, the question's unavoidable. How is it possible that this holy man Jacob, an innocent man dwelling in his tents, one of our patriarchs, could trick his own father like this, taking advantage of his father's failing eyesight to deceitfully take what was not his? And similarly, if Rebecca, one of our matriarchs, was so sure that Jacob should be the one to receive the blessings, why does she have to go behind Isaac's back like this? I mean, we're talking about over here one of the holiest couples in history. They were our grandparents, our patriarchs and matriarchs. They would have been happily married by then 84 years. One would assume it would be safe that they can keep no secrets from each other. So why didn't Rebecca just go to Yitzchak and say her opinion? I really think Jacob should get the blessings. And I'm sure Isaac would have listened, just like Abraham listened to Sarah, in accordance with God's instructions, that whatever your wife Sarah tells you, heed to her voice. Why this whole trickery? Well, Isaac's response to all this, no less enigmatic. What happens when he realizes what happened? I mean, why does he simply resign himself to it? Why doesn't he cancel the transaction and say, "Jacob, you shouldn't have got it"? But he doesn't say that. On what basis? I mean, he should have said, "Jacob, you got these things with trickery. It doesn't belong to you." But what does he say instead? Isaac says, "I knew I was duped." He leaves things the way they are. He says, "You know what, Esau? There's nothing I can do. Your brother got those blessings. He too shall be blessed." And then he gives him he also blesses Esau, and he blesses him. He should be a master over his servants. And, he says, "What should I do, my son? Jacob got them before you." Now, this whole story doesn't really make sense. I mean, what are we to make of it? And what lesson are we supposed to derive from it? I was discussing this with my friends, my colleagues last week. And one friend shared a beautiful insight based on the Rebbe's teachings in the one of the famous talks written in the book Alakuti Sichos, a volume of books that are right here behind me. Many of the talks where the Rebbe actually sheds light on this puzzling story, and it really empowers us with a crucial lesson, a life lesson that may be more relevant now with what's going on in the world than ever before. You see, Isaac's cunning is a lesson training us how a Jew is supposed to respond to Esau. The Torah is teaching us how to identify an enemy and how to overcome him. In Jacob's time, the enemy was his brother Esau, who embodied the ideology of falsehood and lies. For Esau was a man that lived a double life. To the world, he presented himself as the nicest guy, not as an enemy. To his father, he made himself so righteous to win his father's favor. But it was all a lie, because when nobody was looking, Esau murdered, and he looted, and he raped, and he plundered without restraint. All his life, Esau attempted to wear Jacob's clothing, to be the Holy One. The only way for Jacob to outmaneuver his brother Esau was to respond in the very same way, to put on Esau's camouflage, dress up as the enemy, and use his own tricks against him. Friends, because Esau presented himself as a Jacob in order to take what he didn't deserve, Jacob had no choice but to dress up like an Esau to take what he did deserve. Imagine two young brothers. One is violent, mean, cruel. The other is quiet, he's calm and reserved. The older brother regularly mistreats his younger brother. He annoys him, he taunts him for no reason at all. And the younger brother simply takes it and he says nothing. Now one day, the older brother comes in crying to their father about the younger brother. And the older brother says, this younger brother blew up at me and he hit me. And he smacked me in the face. But instead of empathy, the father responds to the older son with a smack of his own. The older brother couldn't believe it. He hits me, and instead of supporting me, you actually hit me too? But this father isn't stupid. He said, listen, you harass your brother day in and day out, and every time he does nothing. And if he finally decided to give you a taste of his own medicine and hit you back, I can only imagine what you must have done to him first. You see, friends, Esau's trickery wasn't new. The very first sin in history, when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, was actually the brainchild of the serpent, whom the Torah describes as cunning, more than all beasts of the field that the Lord God has made. And that is precisely how the serpent got them to sin. What did he do? First, the serpent came to Chava, to Eve, as a friend. As he said, I only want the best for you, he tells Eve. He says, eat the fruit. And on the day that you're going to eat from it, your eyes will be opened. And you're going to be like the angels. You're going to know good, and you're going to know evil. But what the serpent didn't tell Eve was that what it really, really wanted was for Eve to get her husband Adam to eat from the tree so that he would die. And afterwards, the serpent planned to marry Eve, to marry Chava. Now, the serpent's lies and trickery actually worked, because nothing excites a person like curiosity and the prospect of attaining power. And so, as the Torah tells us in the book of Genesis, and the woman saw that the tree was good food, and that it was a delight to her eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, so she took its fruit, and she ate. And she also gave her husband with her to eat from the fruit, and he also ate it. Friends, 2,000 years later, Esau deployed the same corrupt tactics. The beginning of our portion states that Isaac loved Esau because trappings was in his mouth. The simple meaning is that Esau was a good hunter who caught animals that Isaac would eat. But the Midrash explains that he loved him because the trappings in that is Esau's mouth, What does that mean? Esau used to manipulate his father. He would talk like a Torah scholar. He would ask questions. He says, Dad, how do I tithe my salt and straw? Now, really, salt doesn't have to be tithed, but he made himself like a wise, holy man. And his father thought that he was so careful in the observances of the commandment that he even wants to tithe his salt. To all the world, it looked like Esau, got up in the morning, spent his day studying in the yeshiva, but instead he was out in the field committing heavy crime. And evil today works the same way. Exactly the same way. It presents itself as the paragon of civil justice, as the embodiment of righteousness, as the champion of human rights, and as the picture of sensitivity, refinement, nobility, and morality. I am the civil and good one, it declares. I am the one who deserves the world's compassion, the world's empathy, because I am so good. And indeed, evil will have you believe that it is not Esau at all, but Yaakov who is the criminal. You see, because evil, existential threat, isn't in its evil character, it is in its deceit. Evil character could always be destroyed. Deceit, a cancerous tumor disguising as a healthy, vibrant limb, is a threat to everything good and everything holy. There's a story, a classic Hasidic anecdote states that when the world was first created, in the beginning of time, the evil inclination looked like you expected what you would expect it to look. It looked red-faced, looked like it had horns. But because it looked so evil, everybody avoided it. And it couldn't get any customers. So the story goes on. Eventually, you know what it decided? Let me rebrand. Let me put on a nice prayer shawl. Let me put on a nice Shabbos coat. Let me grow a nice beard. Let me put on a nice hat. And now when it comes to a person dressed up, oh, look how righteous I am. I look like the good inclination. I look like a big rabbi. And instead of telling the person to sin, it says, no, don't sin. But you know what? I have some ways for you to do mitzvahs. Sleep an extra hour and don't go to the services on time so you can focus on your prayer a little better. Or he would say, don't give charity now so you can give more later. Argue with the guy next door to you because he needs to learn his lesson for the next time. Or maybe go to places you shouldn't go and do things you shouldn't do because it's going to cure loneliness. It'll make you a better person. This was the trickery of the evil inclination. And this theme underlies a very unusual story in the Talmud. The Talmud has many different topics and ideas, and one of the most interesting sections in the Talmud are called Agadot of Rabbi Bar Chana. And over the course of several pages in Talmud Baba Basra, the Talmud recounts the remarkable voyage, or the remarkable voyages of the many Jewish sages from Babylonia, during which this Rabbi Bar Chana experienced remarkable phenomena, like an island that capsized, creatures as giant as the earth itself, corpses speaking from the ground, all these like sci-fi story, science fiction stories. According to many commentators, these stories aren't really to be taken literally, but it's actually metaphors designed to teach us very fundamental messages and values for Jewish life. So let me share with you one of the stories. The first story in this Agadah tale says, the Rabbi Bar Chana said, seafarers related to me, that means the people of the sea related to him, that the wave that sinks a ship appears to have a ray of white fire at its head. Okay, nice. What does it mean? The explanation is given. The Rabbi was bothered by the following metaphorical question. He said, how is it possible for such giant ships to be sunk by a mere wave of the sea? In other words, how does it happen that a person can build up a successful and an illustrious life, a great career for himself over many decades, and in one moment of folly, a moment of temptation, he allows it all to come crashing? So the seafarers replied to Rabbah, the evil inclination disguises reality with a ray of white fire. It uses a mechanism of inner certainty that this thing which you have always understood to be evil is the right thing to do, and the world is waiting for you to do it. And in that moment of folly, the inclination distracts him from the truth. That this is something that's actually going to ruin you and your life. And instead, it actually distorts reality. And it convinces the person to believe that this epitome of evil is actually the epitome of good. this sin is going to heal you. This sin is going to make you better. And this is the sin that you really need. And in the moment, under pressure, a person can lose their better judgment with devastating and lifelong consequences, God forbid. So to preempt this and remind us whom we are, and not only whom we are, but whom we are up against, Jacob employs Esau's own game against him. Jacob puts on Esau's clothing, and he uses his wisdom to he uses his cunning to cut down the cunning branch upon which Esau sits. So there's really, when you think about this, there's a powerful lesson here, both on the global level, community level, and also on a personal level. On the community level, the verse states in Proverbs, which means, for you shall wage war for yourself with tachbulos. What does that mean? With strategies or tricks. What does it mean? Our army fights in unpredictable and asymmetrical manners, fooling the enemy and outmaneuvering its booby traps. Thank God, as we see what's going on now. Also, on the diplomatic stage, when we defend ourselves, the world stands up with falsehood and brazenly declares itself to be the face of righteousness, the face of morality. So what do? Our answer is, put on Esau's own clothes and use it against him. We must break through Esau's lines, penetrate Esau's fortress, and overthrow him from within by using their tactics. And finally, on a personal level, there's another very powerful message here. For a person to fulfill his or her mission in this world, they must disguise themselves in some extent to the world's own clothing so that they can lift up the world from within. Every Shabbat for 25 hours, Jewish people bask in the world of holiness, removed from the vanity and the distractions of daily life. What happens Saturday night? You ever hear of Saturday night blues? A Jewish person takes off his Shabbat clothes, puts on the outer clothing layer of the week, the doctor, the salesman, the technician, etc. And what happens then? People get let down. Sadness fills the heart. I mean, it would be wonderful to remain in the world of sanctity, of Shabbat all week, but God tells us, no. Al tira avdi Yaakov, fear not my servant Jacob, because this is your mission. Thus the heart now rejoices in his mission, even though he's going out into the world with Esau's clothing. The soul committedly dresses up in the costume of the body of the mundane world to fulfill its mission here in the material world. And it's true that these worldly garments are a disguise. They're not really you. But you must know that it is only within this camouflage that you can fulfill your mission to build and uplift this world, and thereby receives God's ultimate blessings. Now, the truth is mundane business is a camouflage disguising the Jew's essential soul. And the same as the money, the workplace, taking out the trash from your home and keeping everything in order. Everything mundane. That's not the true who we are. But when a Jew conducts his business and with kindness and with integrity, and he puts gives tzedakah, he helps charity and he helps other people. And he has the charity box on his desks and he starts every day, puts in a coin into tzedakah. And when you are careful to pray every day, when you establish lessons for Torah study in your workplace and at home, and you do what you need to do to help out your spouse at home and to keep them happy, and you serve as an address for every and any concern of their fellow Jew and their fellow friend, and we are there for the Jewish community, what happens then? That brings blessing into his life, and when he is in the world, and he actually is creating another post for God in this material world, where he makes the darkness come into light, which will bring us to an era of Mashiach. What does it mean? It turns the camouflage into the uniform of God's soldier. I wanted to share with you a story that I heard recently. It took place just after the Yom Kippur War. There was a Chabad Chassid. He was a businessman too. His name is Rabbi David Deitch. He was a businessman, lived in Connecticut. He's a part of my wife's family. And he asked, it was after the Yom Kippur War, people wanted to support Israel. He said, Rebbe, what can I do to support Israel in these difficult times? So the Rebbe told him, why don't you open a factory there and you'll give jobs for hundreds of people? Now this new factory he opened, he was in the plastic business. He opened up a factory and there were many challenges. So in 1976, the Rebbe suggested that instead of running it from afar, you're in Connecticut, instead of running the business all the way in Israel, why don't you have someone from your family move there and oversee it personally. So his son-in-law, Rabbi Meir Zeiler, he was only 27 years old, and he was selected for the job. And slowly this company that was called Flocktex became a very thriving business in Israel. In the early 1980s, Reb Meir, who was managing the business, he started going to international shows to promote this plastic and the fabrics he was making, and he traveled to Germany. The problem was, this conference the exhibition was from Wednesday through Shabbat, and the booths were supposed to remain open the whole time. But that wasn't an option for him, because Friday afternoon, 2 hours before Shabbat, he hung up a sign on his booth, closed for the Jewish Shabbat. A little while later, Rabbi Meir visited New York, and he mentioned in a conversation with the Rebbe's personal chief secretary, his name was Rabbi Charkov, about what he did. When he went to this conference, he put up a sign 2 hours before Shabbat, we will be closed for Shabbat. Soon after that, he gets a call back from the Rebbe's secretary, and he said, next time you go to a conference, instead of waiting till Friday afternoon to put up the sign, put up the sign when the exhibition starts on Wednesday. This way, anyone who wanted to go to your booth, they knew they had to do so before Friday afternoon. Because if the sign doesn't go up until Friday afternoon, the customers, maybe didn't have a chance to see the booth before, and maybe you're going to lose out on that customer. Okay, that was a nice practical advice, but there was something at a deeper level here. But on a deeper level, this advice from the Rebbe conveyed a very, very special message. That when a Jew ends up in Paris or Rome or Frankfurt or Nashville or wherever it is, and he needs it, he's not there just to earn money. Because God can provide a person with all the money they need without traveling across the world. But rather his mission is that wherever he is to create awareness about God's mitzvot. So that when a Jew passes by and he sees a sign reminding him about Shabbat, even if it's on a Wednesday, he'll remember, oh, it's Shabbat. There's a creator in the world. And therefore the sign must go up at the beginning of the exhibition and not at the end. Now, Reb Meir, the manager of this company, he also would travel to all the different continents. And he says he once went to a world fair in Brussels. And one year, he learned that this thing in Brussels, when he was going to go, was taking place on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It was in September. But Monday night was the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And since Sunday was never really a very busy business day at these exhibits and these conferences, that meant there was only a half a day to really earn profit from this trip, because Monday and Tuesday already that week was Rosh Hashanah. Nevertheless, knowing that his absence might give a negative signal to his competitors, and especially with the Rebbe's view that he should attend such conferences, so he decided, even though it's only a half a day of business, because he has to observe Rosh Hashanah, he's going to go. And immediately he came in the beginning of the expo, he hung up a sign stating that this booth is going to be closed for Monday afternoon for Rosh Hashanah, because Sunday there was no real business, and Monday's a half a day only. It's going to be closed for Monday afternoon, and he's closing in honor of Rosh Hashanah. As he was about to close, an elderly man came over to him, and he was looking at that sign. And Meir came over, and he saw the man was yelling at the worker there. He goes, what kind of business is this? Why are you closed for a holiday? This is a conference. You came to show what you're supposed to be selling. So the worker started saying, my boss is a religious Jew. And Meir came out, and he saw that this man was quite upset. When he asked the man, where are you from? He said, I'm from Chile. But he really didn't sound very South American at all. So Rabbi Meir says, where were you born? Like, where did you come from before Chile? So finally the facade came down, and he says, in Yiddish, Ich bin a Polischer, which means I'm from Poland. And now he understood. He invited the man to come inside, to sit down by the table. He offered him a drink, and they talked. And the man was still upset and berating Meir for believing in his religion. And Meir simply asked, you know what? Do you want to put on tefillin? He says, tefillin? I don't believe in God. I went through Hitler in World War II. I cannot believe in God. And Meir says, your anger? Totally understandable. But he suggested that being angry has nothing to do with tefillin. You never had a bar mitzvah. You never put on tefillin. Let's do it right here, right now. Eventually, the man agreed. As he put on the tefillin and he recited the words of Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, the Lord's our God, the Lord is one, he began to weep. And when he finished the prayer, he hugged Reb Meir and he thanked him profusely. And when he calmed down, Mayor asked him, do you want to see the fabric you came here for sale? I mean, you came to look at my booth. And he says, fabric? I'm in the fish business. So what are you doing at the Fabric Expo? He says, well, I'm thinking of going into fabric. Rabbi Meir says we didn't do a lot of sales at that expo. But he says, but we knew why we came there. So that a Jew from Chile will put on tefillin and celebrate his bar mitzvah right before Rosh Hashanah. And we also knew that this is going to be a good year for the business. Friends, my dear friends, as we conquer outpost after outpost in this holy fashion, from Beijing to Staten Island to Jamaica to Nashville and everywhere else, we're ready for the coming of Mashiach, when the facade of the world's falsehood and insanity will come down, so that we may manifestly see the presence of godliness, bringing the eternal redemption into empirical existence. May it happen now. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.